Now, Matt, let's get to gender pay, right? Because I think the car thing is also another big issue about why they are where they are, but we'll talk about that in a different way in a second. So, you caused the sky to fall in because you pointed out one of the fatal flaws of the report, which has been put forward, which is it's not about the average pay of men versus women. It's the median pay in an organisation, which means CEO, cleaner, in the middle. Now compare boys versus girls. That in and of itself is not what the report is purporting to be, of course, either in the way the government presents it or the media reported it. You pointed this out and, oh my God!
Well, it's a whole hill of nonsense. There are so many flaws in this report. It is a completely useless report. And as you say, the headline figures of these reports are repeated breathlessly, as if they're gospel, when they don't compare like-for-like jobs. They don't compare apples for apples. They lump part-time work in with full-time work. I mean, the ABS doesn't do that. They split out different types of workers when they report wage details. And why do we have this agency? We've already got a statistical agency called the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and if we want to collect this sort of data, why don't we just ask them to do it? What has become clear over the years is that the Workplace Gender Equality Agency has an ideological agenda, and it's taxpayer funded. Your taxpayer funds. It gets me very angry that we are wasting taxpayer dollars on such nonsense. It's total and utter nonsense. And then on top of that, Paul, if it does have any real world effect, it does perpetuate these ridiculous diverse and equity and inclusion policies in corporate workplaces, which do just breed resentment among especially young men. And I see it with young people all around me these days who are attracted to the poisonous ideologies of Andrew Tate and his ilk. Yep. It is perpetuated by this nonsense. Why don't we just, well, if there is a problem with women being paid less, let's identify who is doing that and take them to court, because that is illegal. That's what we should be focused on, not dividing our society into genders, into races, into all of these different artificial categories which do nothing but divide us.
Yeah, see, James, when I saw this, again, another little penny drops, right? In the same way they went after the Reserve Bank governor as the individual who was the one creating interest rates, as opposed to the government not actually doing anything with its policies, they were able to divert attention and responsibility from themselves. If they can produce a list of evil, moustache-twirling billionaire companies, then everyone jumps on Twitter and says, boycott, insert, right? But there's a couple of things here. Language matters, right? Yes. And I do want to harp a little bit on average versus mean, right? Which is, you've got the Greens who don't know the difference between turnover and profit. You've got the left who don't know the difference between equity and equality. And you're in this scenario where these reports are really playing to people, thinking these words are all interchangeable. They're not.
Well, no, they're not. As you said, I mean, there's so many things that people do and they play with language. You know, it's the same sort of thing, you know, rich versus wealthy, all of these sorts of things. And people equate all sorts of things. And the point of all of this stuff is to muddy the language, to not be precise, Paul, and that is to sow division between different groups that people can then lever against one another. I think the point that Matt makes about, you know, Andrew Tate is really a good one here, but I think there's a broader point too, is that do we really need to start, you know, creating this whole sort of war of the sexes, battle of the sexes, rather than looking at, and you know what they don't want to be looking at? They don't want to be looking at the fact that household incomes in this country have shifted backwards by 6.1%, much more than any other OECD country. So, you know, they're not talking about that. They're saying, oh, but women are getting dudded because of big evil men, and then everybody's got to go do the hair shirt thing. You know, and I'm with Matt. You know, if you've got two people who've got 10 years experience in the same job and you're paying one $20,000 more than the other one, absolutely that's wrong. Don't do that. But you can deal with that. But this sort of stuff, this is distraction from the way everybody's living standards in this country are going backwards, and the growth rate that is projected for us for the next 20 years, 2.2%. Other countries are going to beat us. We're going backwards relative to other countries. This is the real scandal that we need to be looking at seriously in this country.
So you know, Nicholas, again, easy ways to dismiss this conversation and the points being made. Oh, it's four blokes talking about... Okay, whatever. But here's the deal. It is already illegal to pay people for the same job a different amount of money based on their age. So where's the federal government turning around and saying, well, we're going to police this more, we're going to send people more notices. If they don't change their ways, then we'll take them off to the appropriate authority. Otherwise, they're just basically saying, Twitter, sick 'em.
Well, look, I've got to say I completely disagree with this conversation up until this point. I mean, like Matt, I've got an economics degree as well, specialised in economic statistics, so I know the difference between
average, right?
mean. Well, no, you're confused on that point, Paul. Mean and average are the same thing. I think you're trying to say median and average. They're different. The mean is the numbers divided by the number of values. The median is when you take the total set of data and go to the middle point. And the mode is the number that comes up the most. So
Shall we bring out the whiteboard?
Got those things confused. But the point is, when there's a 22% difference in wages between men and women in the workforce, and when you can compare different businesses in different sectors and see that there are discrepancies that exist between different companies in the same sector, you can see that there's clearly some big problems that persist in certain companies in Australia. And so I do think the fact that this is all getting published now is a good thing. Because it's not acceptable in modern day Australia that we
answer Matt's question. Matt, ask a question.
Okay, riddle me this. If women are paid 20% less, why can't I start a business and just employ women, save 20% on my labour costs and undercut the rest of the competition? Why aren't there examples of businesses doing this? So, I mean, if you're right that women are being paid 20% less, wouldn't that be a great strategy for any business? Clearly it's not. Clearly that doesn't work because this data is nonsense. And in fact, the Nobel Prize winner of economics last year got the Nobel Prize for proving the gender pay gap is largely a myth, that most of the pay gap is explained by the differences, especially differences in travel, in risk, in danger of different jobs. I mean, it's a very well-established econometric fact that there's just no real evidence here for a large gender pay gap in Western countries. This data doesn't provide any insight into that question, none at all.
Nicholas?
And it's just simply
I disagree with you on that point. Well, again, time and time again, you look across businesses and you see that those people in the top quartile of earners in businesses tend to be men. And so we've got to look at these businesses and say, OK, how do we give more opportunities for women to get into those top quartile of earners in business? What I was pleased to see, though, Matt, was that the investment bankers did far worse than the mining industry or the construction sector. So, your beloved resources sector are no longer the bad boys when it comes to gender, or at least on the issue of gender pay. It's the investment bankers that got the dunce card in that regard.
Hypocrisy,
James, you get to
does benefit. Hypocrisy does.
Yeah, but James can finish this off here, and then we're off to a break.
Oh, look, I just think that to keep fighting about these sorts of things and exercising these divisions in society needlessly when we're all going backwards, it is just so irresponsible.